Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Peya, Peirik Beis, Halacha Gimel, and Halacha Dalid. We're going to be learning today Daf Chaf Aleph. We left off on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amid. Just quickly recapping that when we learned in the Mishnah on Daf Chaf Amid Beis, towards the end of the Mishnah, that Amar Rabban Gamliel Moihagen Hoye Beis Abba, that when it came to olives, they would give it one for each direction. We did not explain that. All right, we just went through the concept of, we're learning about a stay Elon, and it's amazing how Al Pinigla, why is it that by a stay Elon only a fence is mafsik? The reason is because since trees are anyways so separated, so what if there's a water canal? So what if there's some fallow, unplanted space? Trees anyways, there's one tree here, you don't plant a tree one back to the other. It's Al Pi Nigla, trees are anyway separated, so to make a halachic separation, you have to mamash put a fence. Al Pi Chasidus, it's mamash punk fakert. Al Pi Chasidus, since ki ha'adam eitz ha'sadem, and just like people, we're learning Bashgacha Pratas, Tanya Peirik Lamed Beis these days, that we're so connected that only mamish a mechitza, a goder, can affect a separation. And even there we said that if you have the knocking branches, and then we had on top of that, when it comes to a carob tree, that even royin zedze, and as we learned, royin means that if you climb to the top of the tree, and then you can see the other top of the tree, means if you go to your highest madrega, and you can see another yid on their highest level, that in itself is enough to affect such a deep connection that not even a geder, afilu mechitza shel barzel, right, enam afsekes. That is, that we have to explain the pshat by the olives, and also, on top of Daf Chaf Aleph, that Rabbi Loza ben Rab Tzadok had in his tradition, the version in the name of Rabbi Gamliel, that not only is it by olives, even by, not only by olives, but even by charuvin, you don't even need to have royin. They only have to be in one side. We're going to explain this as we learn today's daf. Now, we're going to have a rule of Rebbe Mana. There's going to be 3 versions of what he said. And here again, this is throughout Yerushalmi, the Gemara is going to make a point to show that it's not 3 different girsa'os which would contradict one the other, 3 different versions, but they all work one with the other. We try to consolidate and bring together as much as we could. Okay, now we're going to have on Halacha Dalid, on Daf Chaf Aleph from the base, we're going to have more, or we're going to have additional factors that are relevant to the number of payas that are required by a field. All right, in other words, fields are generally united. Unless something is mafsikit, whether it's stealing with a geded, whether it's grain, legumes, many other things could be mafsik. Now we're going to learn about scenarios where there is no physical divider. Eloma, first of all, if you are harvesting separate species, as we'll explain, every species needs to have for itself its own paya left, even though there's no physical divisions in the field. We're going to also learn today that at times, and dafka at times, not always, the number of threshing floors, because when you harvest, you can decide not to make one threshing floor. So we're not even talking about the harvesting. We're talking about that after you harvest, then you have to go ahead and you go through the various steps. And after you winnow it, then you're going to put it in a pile, and then ultimately you're going to smooth it out. The smoothing out, which is the final act that you do on a designated area that we are calling a threshing floor, that at times the numbers of threshing floors will determine, for each group that's going in their own threshing floor, they have to have their own paya. We'll see at times. And another Gavaldic concept that we'll learn today is the power of kavana. Even when threshing floors, making it into 3 threshing floors, so 3 payas, it's not actually because you made them into 3 threshing floors. It's what was your intent when you were harvesting it, irrelevant to what you did at the end. When it comes to paya, the obligation of pay is when you harvest it. What you have in mind, b'shas the ktsira, b'shas the harvest, will be a lot more powerful versus what you actually did at the end, as we'll see. And finally, in the Mishnah, we'll have a story. And it's not just, you'll see the story is simple, but what we're going to learn a big derech. And that is like this, that of course, when we don't know Svara, do you know that in the Bavli, we view Svara as a Doiraisa, right? When the Gemara normally asks many times, Lama likra Svarahu, why do I even need to have a pasuk? It's a Svara. In other words, implying that if something makes sense, not to the das balabatam that hepech das Torah, to a Tana, to an Amoira, to a Yid that's properly connected, that is a Doiraisa. We only use that if we don't have a tradition. So whenever there is a doubt in a certain halacha, we'll see in the Mishnah that Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, the ben of a Nasi, he would ask his Chavedim, do you have a Kabbalah, beneged this halacha? Because if anyone has such a tradition, all the svaras in the world are put aside. We use our minds after we have the svara, nasa v'nishma, and that's the way Ayid learns Torah. Whatever we're makabel. If we don't know, then we do the best with our minds to push it further. Okay, Chavra, without any further ado, Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, beginning of the Gemara. Right, the Mishnah began by saying that Hakoil Mafsik Lizroyim, but in contrast, when it comes to a stay Elon, the only thing that creates a division, which would demand for each side of the division to have its own payah separated from it, is the Goder, is the fence. And then the Mishnah says that even if you have a fence, if you have the knocking branches, the Seyor Koitesh, now we already translated that yesterday, but here's the Gemara. So the Gemara says, what's the meaning of Koitesh? So the Gemara answers different Girsois. We're going to go with the version that Ke'eli B'machtesh. Just like when you have a pestle that is banging against the mortar, the knocking branches, this is one way of understanding it, isn't only that the branches are touching each other on the top. So you have the fence in the middle, you have a tree from one side, you have a tree from the other side, and the branches are touching each other. You have to have that the branches are banging against the wall. And if it's not banging against the wall, then it's not going to undo the Goder. That's a stronger division. It's bringing against the wall. Or Koitish only al gabi Goder. It only has to interlock over the fence, which is what we were saying the whole time. But maybe not. Maybe it's not only that it has to interlock over for it to undo the power of the mechitza, of the geder, it has to actually push against the geder itself. Which one is it? Clarifies the Gemara that min ma seyor koisesh, from the words of the Mishnah. It's amazing how the Gemara over here changes the sin into a samach, which are two letters that are commonly interchanged. We understand that ein hagoder koisesh. Seir means here. Seir means branches. The branches have to interlock. Not, I think I lost something over here. Not the branch with the fence. Only the branches, even if it doesn't touch the fence.
Recording in progress.
I lost you guys for a second, and it looks like we're back. Okay, so now was then Hada Amra. You got it? We're good. Yeah, Chevra, YouTube. You don't have the sound. A minute.
That's all you want to take.
No. I got it. Good. So Hada Amra Koisesh al Gabi Goder. It only has to knock above the fence. What's amazing, Chevra, is that we learned the Gemara the way we learned the Gemara. But in the Rambam, if you remember, when the Rambam speaks about this halacha, the Rambam actually holds that it has to have both. In other words, for it to undo the fence, it's not enough that it's interlocking on top, but also you have to have the branches touching against the fence itself. So I was just thinking, Al Pi Chasidus, based on what we said yesterday, that a geder is mafsik. But if the higher part, let's say, is the nefesh alikis, if the nefesh alikis is still connected, which it is, then the geder is not mafsik. Very nice. So the pshat of the Rambam is
Recording in progress.
that it's not only about the godly soul being connected. In order to undo the geder, let's say the wall is like the behemoth. There has to be an attempt. There has to be an attempt to fight against the division of the nefesh habahamis. There has to be a struggle with it. At least someone is struggling. I feel divided. I want to be connected, but I have a disconnect. If you don't have that, that's the way that Rambam obviously learned the Gemara differently, and that's the way he paskins. All right. Now here we go. Rav Mana, like we mentioned in the intro, Rav Mana will make a statement. Actually, there are three girsais of what he said, and the Gemara is going to show that all of them are working with each other. So, version number one, or maybe Rav Mana himself, said different statements at different times. So Rav Mana, Omar Zimnin, that's about. Sometimes he said, number one, Dahavei ba b'toich arba ames. He's all speaking about this chiddush, that interlocking branches negate the power of the fence, uniting the stei ilon, allowing you to take one pair for all. That's only if the trees are within 4 ames. Within what, Vlad? It doesn't say it. We'll see. Within what? There has to be a within. If it's beyond 4 ames and there's a fence, I don't care if it's a seyar koitesh. The geder is mafsik. We'll see. Other times, Zimnin, he would say, they have to be within 10 tvachim. Again, he didn't explain with who and what within 10 tvachim. And now yet a third time, he would say, that, just to know guys, a beisa is a field in which a saw of seeds could be planted. That's the way it works. Just like we had by the Kav. What is that Bepoel Mamish? Just to know, it's 50 by 50. 50 by 50 amas is 2,500 square amas. And in other words, that within 2,500 square amas, you have to have 10 saplings. Benetuyan matas is small trees. In other words, Vlad, around every tree, there's around 250 amas. Right, 2,500 for 10, 250 with 1. That's the right ratio for what the Gemara now is going to say like this. Mo'at shmamina, meaning, how do you understand this? He wasn't contradicting himself. He wasn't saying other things. He was saying 3 points that have to work one within the other. So the Gemara now begins to clarify. The first statement that he used to make at times, that what? That again, that when does interlocking branches take away the division of the geder? Only v'hu sheyu b'toich arba ames lagoder. The trees have to be within 4 ames of the fence, which means, let's look inside Chevra the Pnei Moshe, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The third to last Pnei Moshe, Koloimar, right? Zimnim dahavaba, b'toich arba amas koloimer, lepa'amim amrin b'din hazem, shetzorech sheyiu netuyin hoyolonois, that the trees have to be within daladamas to together. Right? Expounds the Pnei Moshe. To hoil the ein nechoikim daladamas together, since they are taka within 4 amas, therefore mechashvin la'anfei hoyolon, we consider these branches ha-me'uravim al gaboy, that are interlocking into the other branches from the other tree on top of the fence. And again, that's the way we learn Pshat in the Gemara. That's the maskana. It doesn't have to touch the wall. It's just that they are intermingling above the fence. Al gaboy mikan mikan lasois oisim k'stei ilanachas. That is what makes the field into one orchard. She'ein kan hefsek, even though begashmi is there is a fence. Ulafuke. What is he being mechadish? He's excluding, I'm reading inside the Pnei Moshe, that if the trees are further from the fence, and we're speaking about both trees, side the one of this side and the one of the other side, if both, I think if I can, even if one, either or, even if only one, very good. So then, doesn't help that they are interlocking for that to make it considered one.
you again.
You lost me again. All right. It's the internet is not stable, and I can't push it bleed net, and I'm going to bring just my iPad and going forward, and that's it. I think it's a little bit better. I'll do my best I could.
The 4 amot is like a personal space.
That's amazing, huh? In other words, the tree itself, think about it. The geder is a problem, right? The geder is the divider. I think it represents trying to get close to each other. The same kind. People people want to get segatnish. Something is not going. It's a difficult moment in the shalom bayis. If both parties are dealing with the geder, they're looking at where is this coming from. From now on with Rabbi Smith, you have to use different mishalim of a rebbe and a talmud. It's much better. It's the same kind. So if you had a disconnect, the talmud doesn't feel it. Okay, but if they have to be close to each other. Okay, that's number one. That was the first statement that he made. We're going to turn to Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. The second statement that he would make at times, that what? V'hon sheyu b'toich asara. That the Seir Koiseish, which creates a connection, which negates the division, is when the branches are within 10 tfachim. What are we talking about? So he says it's when Beinoif l'noif, it's when the branches are within 10 tfachim, one and the other, meaning looks on the pnei Moshe, top pnei Moshe, the hun sheyu b'toich asara tfachim beinoif l'noif, v'ha de ka'amar the zimnan amrin ba shebelvat sheyu b'toich asara tfachim beinoif l'noif shebetzad zeh l'noif le'ilan shebetzad zeh. They have to be within 10 tfachim.
They don't even have to touch.
No, they have to touch. They have to touch. In other words, the way I see it, Vlad, it's not. In other words, there has to be a closer proximity.
They have to be closer, but they don't have to.
No, I didn't understand. I think they have to interlock. They have to bang against each other.
Well, you can bang each other in the width.
Okay, so Vlad is making a good point. So I'm using the words interlocking, and maybe that all of that has to be corrected. Knocking, not interlocking. In other words, they have to bang against each other. So what happens if they're very far away? That means they're beyond 10 tefachim. The ruach is making them bang. That's not good enough. They have to be avodah b'koyach asmai to the most that you could, and then the Holy Spirit is going to connect you together. Now this explains that the third statement that Rav Mana makes, that this only works b'netuyim mata esel lebeisam, like we explained, that every tree takes up around 250 ames. That's when the branches will be within 10 tfachim of each other. One is connected to the other. In other words, the third statement is just like saying the second statement. You have to understand how planting trees work. If you don't have 10 in a beisah, you only have 9. We're speaking about they are separated symmetrically. That means if you only have 9 or 8, so there's more space between one and the other, the branches will not be with 10 tefachim one with the other.
Right.
Beautiful. And all of it means that there has to be a proximity within the alamas of the geder, the branches. We're speaking about the branches from the two opposite sides of the fence, which is why there is a good density. It's not a sparse density. The mele taka, there's a fence, but because of they are at least close to the best of their ability, that's why they undo the negate the fence. Okay. So that was the Seir Kotesh. The second thing in the Mishnah was Royin. Royin is self-understood. We spoke about that yesterday. What we didn't yet explain is that, according to everyone, Rabbi Gamliel, who said that by Beis Abba, by olives, it's a crazy. A fence is not negating the union. Not only if you can go on top of this olive tree and on that olive tree and you can see. You don't even need that. All of the trees that are in one ruach of the city, we'll see, of one direction, they are automatically connected. Doesn't matter how many walls are in between them. They are in the same. Now we're speaking the pashtus. We have 4 ruachos in this sense. Ruach means not a wind. Ruach means a direction. Right? So you have east, west, and you have north and south. So all the trees in the east, if obviously, if they belong to one person, if a wealthy person, so he owns, not in the city, outside the city, but he owns in the fields on the east, Now, he owns one, someone else owns in between. I don't care if there's fences, I don't care if it's not Royan. For every Ruach, he would give one. Okay, so let's read it inside.
Meaning it's not a contiguous.
Not only is it not contiguous, there can be a fence. Not only can there be a fence, there is no Seir Koisesh. Not only is it that there is no Royan, but by olive trees, olive is Primius Atoira, Shemen, is when then there's nothing, you have to be in the same Ruach. You have to be in the same Ruach. Ruach means, no, I know that, but I'm saying in Kabbalah you have that every Ruach represents another Midah. Right? So you have, just to know, so east is Tiferes. In other words, people that are Rahmanim, they are connected. Or you have Yisoid is Maidev, just to know the Ruchais. And then Chesed and Gevurah. So that in itself connects you. The Ruach connects you. Now the Gemara asks like this. Me, again, different Gersois. Me, mechaven lehem aruchais. Frag the Gemara. Look inside the top Mahara Fulda. Me, mechaven lehem haruchais. Kevan, all right. Because like a daitech, that beruchai shel oidam ka'amar. The Havamina is that we're speaking about east. What's east-west? On what? On the compass. That's the Havamina. Let me explain to you what I mean. I'm sitting in a room right now, I'm facing Maidev. Let's say that this is taka built that way, Maidev. But what? So if that's Maidev, Mizrach, right, north and south. So I have a simple question. If the city were to be built exactly that way, it fits. What happens if the city is built like this? Well, cities, if you were to square them off, even though they're not perfectly square, but if you were to square them off, and we're going to learn Masechta Seidav, and we learned Eidav, how we do that halachically, it's not mechuven. It's not mechuven means, how will I even get there? Like when I look, if the city is not exactly aligned with the compass, so it doesn't fit. So how are you going to how will you determine that? You're going to determine it. Okay. So forget about the city. Where do you draw the line? If I'm putting everything on east and on west, right? This is west. This is east. Where do I put the line? Here, here, here. How would you determine where the east ends and the west begins? In other words, if the city, if punkt it's going to be exactly aligned with the directions of the compass, that's not a kasha. Everything here, by me, the way I'm sitting, would be west. Everything here would be east. Everything here would be north. Everything amachaya. But the moment cities are not built on the compass, so the moment it's going to be a little bit off, it's going to be very difficult to make that kavanah.
Right.
Because this is south, right? So south. This is south. Where does it end over here? Where does it end over here? Where does south and where does north begin? It's impossible.
You just give it different directions.
Okay, let me give you. I'll spill the beans and let me go like this. Are we placing the city inside the ruchos of the world? Or are we doing the opposite? We're looking at the ruchos of the city.
You go in the center of the city.
When you do the latter, that will answer the question. In other words,
You just assume.
we not assume. I don't even need to use the words east or west. If the city is placed like this, say everything that's here is one ruach. Everything that's here is another ruach. Everything here is a third. Everything here is a fourth. Because if what's ground zero is soivev or mamali? Are you beginning with the soivev and you're trying to squeeze the city in it? It's not going to work. It's going to get very complicated. Where do you draw the lines? If you're going milmaila lamata, if you're going milmata lamaila, then the city is the determining factor. Forget about the ruchai sheba oilam. Forget about the compass. Forget about east, west, north, and south. Look at the city from each. I'll tell you more than that. What happens if a city is not a square? If a city is a triangular? So if that's the case, if we're going memale soive, if we're going milmata lamayla, then he would only leave 3 payas, not even 4, just 3. If there's a triangular, everything in this side, there's only 3 sides, pseidim. One from the one side, one from the second side, one from the third side. And if the city is, on the other hand, it's a pentagon, so then you would give 5. In other words, it's not the Ruchei Sheba Olam. If it's the Ruchei Sheba Olam, being that cities are not exactly aligned with the Ruchei Sheba Olam, it's going to get complicated. Where to put the boundary between east, west, north, and south?
The trees are outside the city limits?
Outside the city limits. But David, people didn't plant 80 miles away. So it's outside the cities, it would be orchards. And those orchards would be shaykh to the people in the city. That's the way it worked. Outside the city, there was a Beis HaKvares. Outside, people went to work. People walked back. There was no trend. There was no cars.
There's a whole other issue with that, by the way. When you take that square, you go this.
Yeah.
What happens in this?
In the corner.
In the 45-degree angle.
Very good. In other words, when you speak about directions, there's two ways of going. These are words that we're familiar with Chassidus. If you're going milmayla lamata, if you're going from soiviv to amali, it gets very complicated. Where do you place it? If you're going memale soiviv milmata lamayla, then look at the city. The city is the ground zero, and like I said, the city only has 3 directions. So Zion. Everything and then there's only 3 payers. If the city has if it's a pentagon, then there's going to be 5 payers. Let's read it inside. Okay. Answers the Gemara. Ha'ir mechavenes lehem haruchos. You base it from the city. How great is that? And indeed, as the Gemara says, that Amar Rabbi Yosef Rebbe Bun shall base Rebbe. This is the same household of the Nesiim. They would actually place on every ruach, not of the oilam, not of the. They put one north, one south. No, there's a city. Let's make the city into a square. Towards each of the directions of the city, a direction of the city, like who was saying, Kevin, it could be northwest. Not north. It can be off. It can be in middle. A mix. He would have on each one a bad. Because he understood this din of the Mishnah that every ruach of the ear is viewed as another place. You understand? And every olive press, and how did it work? You brought to that olive press the olives that grew from that side. Now the idea is the same. Let's go back to chinuch. In other words, chanoich not al pi darkoi. Chanoich means that you see some people. They need to have more visuals when they learn. Some people love reading. Some people, so that's the way to do it. And every group, that is what divides them. And people that are in the same spiritual neighborhood, I don't care if one guy Begashmias is here, one guy is Begashmias on the other end of the world. Nothing is mafsik between them. You don't have to have the banging branches, not interlocking. You don't need the banging branches because they are in this. They have the same ruach. Chassidim ein mishpacha. Chassidim have a certain Chassidish bindel. All of them are connected. Fits. Okay. Now, going back to that girsa, to the first version of the Mishnah, not Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Tzadok, that ruchais unite for olives. Olives is shemen. The deeper you go, the more united you are. You're in the same ruach, you're already good. For carobs, you have to have royin. So says the Gemara, ho yesham shloisha ilanos, guys, 3 trees, let's go. Doesn't mean 3, it means 3 rows of trees. So I feel bad for the chevra here because it keeps on dropping. Harishoinim now. Let me just do this by heart. Let me give an example. From Masechta Brachas, let me quickly put on the.
Recording in progress.
I'm sorry, guys. Tomorrow's coming. Better machines. Guys, do you remember in Masechta Brachas when it comes to benching and the zimun, right? The shamish, if there are 3 groups, and how can they be mezamen together? We did learn that even 2 groups, that if you have one shamish serving them both, the shamish unites them, the waiter unites them. We won't have that over here, it's going to be different. In other words, royin, let's speak about the royin. So you have 3 rows of carob trees. If you're standing on top of the outer row, you can see the tops of the branches of the middle row. cannot see the other side. If you're standing on the other direction, you can also see the top of the branches of the middle. The outer and the outer cannot see each other. But if you're standing on top of the middle, then you can see both directions. So the question will be, does that phenomena unite the outermost ones? Will we say it over here? Meaning that if you own all of them, could you get away with, not get away, could you separate same number of a 60th of all, but one from all? Carobs are one of the examples the Mishnah gives. It's a non-perishable. You're chayiv to separate payah. We're going to go midaraisa. So let's read if you have 3 rows of trees and when you're standing on top of the outermost one to the right, you can see the top of the middle. Yerushalmi means the other direction. Was the outermost ones can see the middle, which means the middle can see both sides, but one side and the other side are too far away. So it's gavaldik. So if you want to leave payah from the middle, you could leave payah from the middle, not only from the middle, side from the middle, and to the one on the right, and to the row to the left. Why not? Because you have royin. From the perspective of the emtsoyim, you have royin. Let's say from every row, a 60th would be a pound. I can separate 3 pounds from the middle row for the whole thing. Because the emtsoyim are connected to the row to the right and connected to the row to the left. Well, that's really insane. But, so mafrish, another thing, if you want to separate the pound, every row demands a pound. Every row, a 60th will be a pound. If I want to separate it from the row to the right, I can take 2 pounds from the right and for the middle. I can take from the middle, from the right, and from the left, on the middle, 2 pounds also. Umafresh min arashim alam tsoyim. Uminam tsoyim al arashim. But you know what you cannot do? But ve'einoi mafresh min arashim al arashim. If you want to take from the row to the right 3 pounds for it and the middle and the left, that you cannot do. No, it's the fact that there was, like we said, the shamish, that was over. Shamish unites, everyone can make a mezuman. Shamish, a guy can lead it from one group. For all three, everyone. Masha'in can over here, we don't say it that way. Here, everyone has to see each other.
Okay, but from one end and one from the other extreme?
You cannot take from one extreme to the other extreme.
Oh, I got that. You can take 2 from one, let's say...
And then the third from the
middle and the third from the...
Yeah, that's no problem.
So you take 2 from the left, 1 from the right. You included that. What's the practical?
The practice like this. The Rebbe sees all of us. So a person can think, why do I have to have the Ahavas Yisrael towards you? I really don't like you. Why should I even make the effort? I'm good. The Rebbe sees me, the Rebbe sees you. We're connected because some emtsoi sees everyone. That's toignisht. That's the whole thing. That's the whole daf over here. That's the whole thing we learned about B'malei Soiviv. Don't give me to the Ruchais Ha'olam. Don't, in the bigger picture, everything is wonderful and beautiful. Okay, Pfeifen. You, where are you? Like, this is like a good avodah. Mitamal, we're selfless. No, be selfish. Look at yourself. The city is the ground zero. I have to see, if I don't see you, the fact that there was a greater emtsoi, the middle, the kava emtsoi, goes all the way up, all the way down, that doesn't help me. It's not enough for the Rebbe to unite us. We have to unite with each other. That's the practical application. Let's go back.
That's the Chassidus.
That's the only Chassidus here, yeah.
All right. So what if they're touching, not touching, knocking? What if
No, Kevin. Very good. Knocking is for sure negates the division. We're speaking, Kevin, that they're not knocking. They're not knocking. So the charuv, royin, olives, mitzad echad, and then there is a girs in the Mishnah that Rabbi Gamliel had this idea of one direction from the city, even by the Caribs. Okay, let's go weiter. Halacha Daled, the 4th Mishnah. So now we're not focusing on the difference between a zera field and an elon field. We're not focusing on that. We're going to this concept, right? That if you don't have a hefsek, then you can separate payah for the field. Hold on. There's potentially other things that could separate In a field, you have to separate from one and the other. Says the Mishnah. If you are planting your field with one species, I can tell you right away by heart, guys. If you're planting chitim and so'odim, avada, you cannot give payah of the chitim for chitim and so'odim. You can't do that. Every species demands its own. By the way, because of kalayim, we already learned that. Zera achet. Every zera achet, we already had it as its own payah. Now, so he says like this. One might have thought that if you're talking, it's one field, and there's no mechitzas, halachic mechitzas, and it's one species, but for whatever reason, technical reasons, whatever, the balabas is planning to make two different threshing floors. In other words, logistics. He wants to have one because there's a road to the east, there's a road to the west. You have customers, they used to buy it off the threshing floor to facilitate. So says the Mishnah that if you plant your field with one min, even though that you intend to make two separate, we're speaking about someone who's harvesting it at one time. You're harvesting it at one time, but after the harvesting, there's the threshing, the winnowing, and the piling up, and then the smoothing. You plan, while you are harvesting, you plan to do it twice. Says the Mishnah, that doesn't separate it.
You plan to do it twice, or
you plan to do two different locations, two geronois. Nevertheless, noisen peya achas. Guys, we're going to limit this in a moment. That's a rule. There's going to be a yotzim in HaKlal. Before we go to the yotzim in HaKlal, now let's go into another detail.
Difference of two threshing floors?
Because you would think that since you are while you're harvesting it, you're planning to finalize it in two different locations, that should make it into two fields. We don't say that. Now, if you plant your field with two species, like we said, chitim and so'edim, two different things. Even though you dafke for whatever reason, you're going to mix them all together. Today in the machla, right? All the grains together. People do it. They mix them. Nevertheless, since it's two different minim, you have to give shtei payas. That's clear. In other words, separate payas, separate species require, guys, midoiraisa, separate payas. However, let's go to one type in every species itself.
What does that mean? They would thresh barley and wheat together?
Yep, they would pile them together. Now, what happens, my friends, in every species you have subspecies. You can have wheat, and you can have brown wheat and white wheat, just a mushel. So how do you do that? Says the Mishnah, it's chitim. But in the chitim, you have two different subspecies. And by the way, subspecies is not only in the chitim, you can have in so'edim. However, whether it went by color, whether it went by weight, in the same min, the Torah gives 5 grains. In every grain, there are many subspecies. So here, it depends on your intent of the goyden. If ason goyden achas, guys, goyden is not what you actually are doing, it's what you have in mind when you are harvesting it. If when you're harvesting your field that has white wheat and brown wheat, you intend to make it into one goyden, noisen peya achas. If while you are harvesting it, you intend to separate the white wheat from the brown wheat, doesn't matter what you did at the end, it's what you had in mind when you're harvesting. Shtei geronois, this is great. Then noisen shtei peyois.
That's different than the bud.
Beautiful. So it fits. In other words, the rule and then the nuance. Rule is one species, mamish, white wheat, all the same. Even if you intend to make it 2 garains, 1 payer. Wheat and barley, no matter what you're going to do, 2 payers. And if you have one species which has 2 subspecies, then it depends on your kavanah of the goyden, gavaldik. And now says the Mishnah, Maisa, Shezara Rab Shimon ish hamitzpah, and he planted. We're speaking about this case of the Mishnah that you have in wheat 2 subspecies of wheat. And what's the Maisa? It's not the way you read it. He planted it in front of Rab Gamliel. He planted it in front of God Almighty. But he had a shaila regarding payah, so he came to Rab Gamliel. He wanted to know, Chevra, how many payahs he has to give. There's a logic, but he wanted to Hamasoida. The great Rab Gamliel didn't know. He didn't learn it. He didn't learn this case. So he asked his colleagues. He was the head of the Sanhedrin. Nevertheless, and Vishoalu. And what did they find out? That amongst the Chevre there was a Yid by the name of Nachum HaLavlor. Lavlor is a scribe. And he said, Nachum HaLavlor says that Makub Alani Rabbi Meyasha, Icha heard from Rabbi Meyasha. Look at the irony. And Rabbi Meyasha heard it from Rav Nachum's father. Just Rav Nachum couldn't quote his father because Rabbi Yasha learned it from his father. Shekibel Ma'abba, Nachum was saying, from mine tate, that got this a Kabbalah from the Zugais. So you had in the earlier, right prior to the era of the Tanoim, Im Bizman Bayesheni, so we had 4 generations of Zugais. All of them I mentioned in Pirkei Avos. The first is Rabbi Yossi Ish Tzreida and Rabbi Yossi Ish Yerushalmi. They were the first Zugais. The last Zugais was Hillel and Shammai. So he got it from the Zugais that what? Now, what came before the Zugais? Before the Zugais, Chaver the Nevi'im. Shekibel ben Nevi'im. And where did the Nevi'im get it from? Allah Moshe Sinai. That what? It has to do with your kavanah. This nuance of a case, it's 2 subspecies of one. Now, your kavanah will make all the difference. If you made it one goyden David, doesn't mean you made it one goyden. It means you intended while you were koitzer. You then had kavanah that you're going to make it into one goyden. That kavanah unites it. But if while you were harvesting it, then you had in mind to make it into 2 different goydanos, for whatever reason, since it's 2 subspecies and you're going to put them on 2 different threshing floors, then you have to give 2 payas, exactly as we learned in the Mishnah. To be continued.
But it doesn't, in terms of what goes to the Adi,